Have you ever heard of the Total Archery Challenge, Gabe?
I have not. And it reminds me how getting into bow hunting was one of the many things that I was like, I'm going to pick this up and get really good at it. And it just kind of fizzled, unfortunately.
Yeah, dude. So I was just on a podcast with Savon and Rich, and Rich is talking about one of the things that he's going to try is a Total Archery Challenge. Because I was talking about maybe doing the tactical games, and he brought up the Total Archery Challenge. I wrote it down. That's the reason why I brought it up. As soon as I got on with you, I'm like, dude, I want to see if you've ever heard of this before. I have no idea what it is, but I'm going to look it up as soon as we're done on this to see what it's all about. Because anything to kind of test new skills, and especially incorporating fitness and doing something like that, I'm all about it. Jacob Hepner, Total Archery Challenge.
So you guys didn't talk about it at all on the podcast?
Well, he just brought it up as something he was going to do next. And I was saying about doing the tactical games because Jacob Hepner and I have been talking about that. And I said, dude, I don't even know what the tactical games entail. I have no idea. He goes, that's the best way to do it. Just show up. I'm like, oh man, I don't know about that. We'll have to maybe I'm gonna have to do some basic research though on both of these. And then we'll let all the listeners know when I commit to it and we'll go get after it.
So I did a little bit of research on the tactical games, a little like right after I did the sheepdog thing, actually, because I wanted to see how similar it was. Not that we did anything that like incorporated fitness and marksmanship in one, but it got talked about. So I kind of wanted to check it out. And that seems to be like a more strongman type fitness combined with marksmanship. So basic principle being like, how strong, fit, and, how can you control your breathing and heart rate? Because that's such a big piece that goes into marksmanship. That was my takeaway from the tactical games, but it was one of those things where it was a little tough to find like information, like what the actual workout is. Like it doesn't seem super, super organized just because it's so new. So it was a little difficult to actually figure out what it is. But we have a whole bunch of really cool connections that I'm sure could give us like the absolute lowdown. Like I know, obviously Hepner.
We should just get Hepner on the podcast. We should just talk to him about it.
Absolutely. Yeah, we should do that.
Yeah, okay. I'm writing that down.
What's his name is also really Zach Forrest, our friend from Push Press. He's also really big into that. I think he like coaches a couple athletes. And then Pete, our good friend from one of our NCFIT partner gyms, he both competes and has a bunch of athletes at his gym that are like very high level in the tactical games. So a bunch of people we can talk to.
Well, I'll reach out to Jacob and see if he wants to come on to talk more about it and how that works. I was just curious about it, man. I just think, testing your fitness in a variety of different ways is so important. And when Rich brought up, because Rich just got done doing like a 100-mile mountain.
Leadville 100.
Yeah. And, I did
that's not just a 100-mile bike ride either.
That's the difference, right? Because I did the 100-mile century ride with Dan Gillick and those guys. But dude, it took us, that was not the same thing as he said. He had 11,000 feet of elevation climb, which is just,
it's crazy. Yeah. And you're doing it all at altitude,
bro. Yeah. So when he was talking about it, it took him like 8.5 hours or something along that line. And, the century ride that we did was a fraction of that. Because we were doing in, St. Louis, Missouri, where it was just straight up flat.
You did it on a road bike too, right?
I did it on a gravel bike. I did it on a gravel bike on gravel, but it's based like a road bike. Whereas Rich did it on a mountain bike with tons of, incline and whatnot. But it just got me thinking, because I just got off that podcast, those guys like, hey, what other competitions are out there that I think we don't really explore? Obviously you have High Rocks and you have these other like Spartan races and things like that. But like the Total Archery Challenge or the tactical games, like those things, or even the thing that he did, that sounds pretty badass. Like I'd like to do that. I'd like to give it a shot, train for it and get ready for it. So
I love this idea of like finding a thing that you're training for and that being your North Star. I think that especially for someone like you and me to a lesser extent, like we've always had these things that we're like training for. And even though they change, it's always so nice to just like 3 months out, 2 months out, have something that like just the motivation, the structure, but also like the anticipation and then the payoff of like, hey, 3-4 months of very specific work went into this and going out there and actually executing it. Like I loved that. Love that.
Yeah, I think this year what my motivation will be, especially going into 2024. So in October, I'll be doing the Rogue Invitational. And, you know, I did a jiu-jitsu tournament earlier this year, but I think leading in 2024, I want to put like 3 or 4 like events, maybe 3 on the calendar where it's like the Total Archery Challenge. Dude, now you're spending, you know, a couple months leading up to it, like enhancing your bow skills and whatever else is involved in that. I have no idea what's involved in that. But, you know, anytime that you're spending time learning skills and exposure, it just pays off hugely. Like I think back, like even right now, if you ask me, like, go walk on your hands, I could go walk on my hands for a long time. It's because I spent weeks, months, years developing that skill. It's like riding a bike. And I think that if we take time to focus on a challenge coming up in the future, whatever that is, you by design, you're forced to train for it. And then all of a sudden you acquire all these badass skills, you know, and make some new friends and blah, 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 blah. You know, that's my plan for 2024.
It's funny because I was just having this conversation with a really close friend of mine, Jeff, who actually is a listener of the podcast. So I hope he listens to this and
let's go, Jeff.
Get to smile. But he recently texted me because he's actually turning 40 next year. And we were brainstorming because he wanted to do the same thing. Like, hey, what would be like a really cool goal for me on my year that I'm going to turn 40th? And he comes from like a really impressive running background. So he had the idea of like, you know, training for a full 40 mile again, or like getting really into CrossFit again and trying to do really well in the open as a master's, you know, something BJJ related because he's, you know, a police officer, he's into that stuff. So it's funny because we were talking about like exactly the same thing. Like he's another one of those kind of guys that like just loves hitting it, chewing concrete. Like he's just, you know, he's built that way. And it was funny that you mentioned that now because like all of us, he was like, we were literally talking about like what's going to be his like North Star for his 40th year to then like really get after it and train for it. So that was pretty cool. What's your opinion? So let's give Jeff some like live advice here. So he was stuck between training to run a 440 mile, going all in on trying to do well in the open quarterfinals as a master since he's turning 40, or an Ironman. That was the other one, was completing an Ironman.
If it was me, I like the Ironman. And I like the Ironman because it's just so far out. I imagine, you know, he's probably training CrossFit. He's doing some jiu-jitsu. Running 40 miles, like that sucks for sure. Like that's a long way to go. I've never done 40 miles. I've done.
No. So he was going to train to run a 440 mile.
Oh, a 440 mile?
A 440 mile. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, what's his mile right now? I mean,
well, a little context there is he ran for UNC. So like he's also not going from like, you know, off the couch to run a 4. Yeah.
I mean, bro, I think
it's one of those things where like, even though he's probably running like a 5-minute mile now, like the difference between running a 5-minute mile and a full 40 mile when you get there is like, you really got to put in some work. So I think that context is needed.
So yeah, just for the record, I think even if I really wanted to, like, even if I said today, I'm going to run a 440 mile, I don't think, dude, I can't, I don't think my body is designed to go that fast for that long.
You're built like an orangutan.
It's not possible. So I would leave that one out. The fact that he even is considering that is offensive to me. So I'm going to leave it. So the second one would be the open, like that's cool. Like whatever. It's kind of broad. It's kind of almost, I don't want to say it's a cop out, but it's kind of broad. Like, oh, I want to perform well in the open. It's like, okay, like, what does that mean? I think the Ironman's it, dude. You can have your whole family go out. You can pick a location that's badass. Maybe it's Hawaii, maybe it's whatever, or maybe not Hawaii, because that's like pro level. But you could pick a Ironman. Like I remember I was in Mexico one time and they were doing an Ironman. And like, how cool would that be to have your whole family come out? It's your 40th birthday. You finish an Ironman and you could just celebrate that. I just feel like it's such a memorable experience. Compared to like a 440, I mean, what is it? Like one day you're at the track and you get it and it's like, cool. I don't know. I would do the Ironman. I think that's actually, I should do the Ironman for my 40th birthday. That sounds good.
There you go, Jeff. Free advice on the podcast. That was my next question is, would you ever consider, have interest doing in like something like super endurance, something really long? Because that's like way outside. I mean, you did win the marathon row, but I think that's a little different. Or it was a half marathon when you did it.
Half marathon.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, but a little different. But would you ever like train or do something like really long bike, Ironman, kind of stuff like that?
I think that if I had like a group of people that want to go do an Ironman, I'd be down. I would like to do an Ironman one day, maybe for my 40th birthday, honestly. Right now I'm really interested in like, I don't know, the tactical games and like, I'm really interested in that, but your interests will evolve and change. And I think that the one downside to these long distance endurance events is that the commitment of time required to train for them is really high. But yes, I'd like to do an Ironman. I would like to do an Ironman. Actually, I think so. I'm 37 now. I'd like to do an Ironman for my 40th birthday. That's a really cool idea. So maybe I'll start training in a year or two from now.
There you go. Committed on the podcast.
I want to do it. And if Rich, honestly, if Rich hit me up and he's like, hey, dude, let's go do this 100-mile whatever. I'm talking to Sal Frizella about doing a marathon ruck. I mean, dude, that sounds super shitty with 40 pounds on your back. That sounds really like just grimy. But if Rich hit me up, was like, hey man, let's go do a 100-mile bike ride somewhere. I'd be down to train for it and get after it. I mean, I felt good doing that century ride like a year ago in St. Louis. It just was fun to train for something, go get after it.
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to like stuff like the tactical games and even the archery thing, are you like a good shot? And were you like, did you pick it up pretty quick, or has it just been like the time you put into it?
It's interesting you mentioned that. So, I first was exposed to firearms training with Dave Castro. That was he was like my first pistol firearms instructor. So from the get-go, I was learning like really good foundations, which was cool, and I'm blessed to have that experience
from like someone that like knows their shit.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I'm left eye. So I'm left eye dominant, but I'm right-handed, which causes some issues. So some people would actually take the rifle and go left-handed because it gives them a better eye. I still continue to stay on my right hand, but I'd say that I have acquired a skill set because I've put in work to earn it. I don't think that I'm phenomenal. I'm by no means like world-class, but I have a skill at it because I've put in reps, and I've trained with guys who know a lot more than me for a long period of time. With a bow, it's the same thing. Like I've trained with guys. I was first turned on to it at Rogue Fitness. They had a bow out there and I was just fascinated by it. I had never shot a compound bow with the trigger, mechanism. I was just like, whoa, what is this? And so I got home, and fortunately Matthews, which is a archery company, sent me a bow, and I just got pretty into it. And it's something I could do at home, which you can't do that with rifle and whatnot. So the archery,
you can do it here.
Yeah, well, you can do it in Texas. You can't do it in California. You'll get in trouble. So, but I like the bow because you can practice at home. I haven't done it recently, but that's another reason why I want to commit to one of these challenges, is that it'll encourage me to go acquire that skill and go seek out experts like, to help me out further. So yeah, I don't think I'm naturally good at really anything, Gabe. I think that the only way that I get good at things is if I practice them. I'm not like a super naturally athletic person. Like I'm not. Like I've had success in certain things because I've just worked really, really hard at them. And like if you ask me to pick up a new sport, it takes me a long time, but then I'll finally start finding my groove.
Were you so pulling on that thread though, because you played football when you were young, right?
I played football. I only started playing football in high school, and I wish I had played earlier. Yeah. I wasn't really introduced to any ball sports until, it's funny, a cousin of ours, I was at my father-in-law's house, and he's like 10 years old. And I asked him, I was like, hey man, have you ever thrown a ball before? And he's like, no. And so we started playing catch with Caden with baseball. And it's because, I don't know if it's like a Persian culture thing. I don't know what it is, but like I was never introduced to any real ball sports except for soccer. I think it's because my dad came from Iran. It just was not popular at all.
Culturally, right. Yeah. It
just wasn't a thing.
That's so interesting because it was the same for me, right? Like culturally, it was like soccer, and like that's pretty much it.
Yeah, soccer and soccer. Yeah. What do you play? Yeah.
When I came here to the States, like I fell in love with baseball, but I never got to play ball sports because I was so into swimming. That was like what I was doing year round. And that I took so much away from being a swimmer, like a serious swimmer for so long. I think I fully believe that it's a reason that I'm such a big morning person, which makes me honestly, like, I can't imagine being anywhere near as productive as I am if it didn't come easy for me to wake up super early and just like get some shit done. And I honestly, I owe that to swimming all of my life, because it's just like, when you swim, you have early morning practice. Like, that's just like the way it is. And it was that for years. Yeah. But I also wish I had played more ball and team sports.
Dude,
for sure.
So much athleticism, bro.
Yes.
Like I watch like with Cade and these other players, like even in a year's time, like they just go from like not having the best hand-eye coordination to just getting it. And how does that translate into other things? You know, it's huge.
And it's just the time, right? Like their brain is so like malleable. Like they're just, those skills that they're learning now, like that coordination, that body awareness, all of that stuff, like it's getting like hardwired into their DNA to where, you know, even if they take some time off, like you were talking before with handstand walking, like they just have that base of athleticism now that translates to all other things. Like I remember, man, I used to be so like jealous and envious of like those kids in high school or growing up that like you don't play basketball. Like I know you're on the baseball team, but like, you know, we go during lunch and there's a pickup game of basketball. They're just good.
They're just good.
They're just like really good. Like you just,
because they're
it
doing
translates to everything.
It 100%. Yeah. You know, it brings up a really interesting point. Yesterday I was talking to one of our team members. His name's Jonathan at our gym, and he's doing a report for an entrepreneurship class in college. So we get through this whole like interview. He was probably interviewing me for like an hour. He's asking all these questions. Like, how'd you start the business? How'd you get funding? How'd you, whatever, what are some pitfalls? So we get to the end. He's like, hey, what advice do you have for me? I was like, how old are you? He goes, I'm 21. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I feel really old. But I was like, do you remember a time in your life where you were not able to access any information you wanted in your pocket? Like, do you remember any time in your life where you weren't able to order food, swipe right for a date, Google something or whatever without it being accessed in your pocket? He goes, no. I was like, well, what the youth are going to have a disadvantage on now is that they're used to instant gratification all the time. And I utilized that analogy for him. I said, in business, there is no instant gratification. You're going to get into business and it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for a day, a week, a month, a year, and frankly, decades. And so if you're learning this today, and this was my advice to him, like the youth is at such a disadvantage today because they're so used to getting this instant gratification. And in the workforce, it doesn't come that way. And he brought up a point. This is the reason why I'm bringing this up. He goes, well, it's kind of like fitness. And I was like, it is kind of like fitness. I was like, if you want to run a 7-minute mile or a 6-minute mile, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes day by day, week by week, month by month, effort to acquire the skills to be able to achieve that. And so one of the reasons why I think sports are so important for kids, in particular, more dynamic sports like baseball, like those type of sports, ball sports, is because the acquired skill of the eye-hand coordination takes time to develop. And then once you have it, you'll have it, I think, for a very long period of time. So that was my motivation from yesterday's talk with Jonathan. I thought I'd just bring it up here because I think it inspires me even more to make sure that I'm setting my kids up for success, to let them know that in the real world, in business, things don't happen instantly. You got to put in months and months of work.
Yeah. Delayed gratification is so key. There's that really, really old study about how I'm sure you've heard of this, that like the biggest predictor of like a child being successful in the future is how good they are, even early age, at delaying gratification. And they did that study where they like had the marshmallows and the kids. Do you remember this? And
did we talk about this before? I think we might have.
Maybe, but it was just that study where they told kids that like, okay, here's a marshmallow, we're going to leave you in a room, or it was some treat that they really wanted. Yeah. And it was like, if you don't eat it, you can have 2 later. And some kids obviously like were able to wait because they wanted more later. And some kids just, wanted the instant gratification of like the one there. And they followed this group for years in the future. And it was actually a pretty good predictor of how successful they'd be in the future, the kids that were able to delay gratification the most.
Dude, that's
super interesting because it's a really old study. And now I feel like
it's even more prevalent.
For sure. Everything is like right there.
Well, I told this guy, I'm like, honestly, bro, like I almost feel bad for you because you've been brought up in an environment where everything is just ready for you. And now when you try and make money and you're trying to provide as much value to somebody else and you're trying to grind it out, it's not going to happen. And what's going to be difficult for you is you're going to wait a week and a month and 6 months, and you're going to want to get paid more and you're going to want to see growth. And it's just not going to happen because you need more and more reps to get really great at what you're doing. It's going to take years and years and years before you see the fruit of your labor. And I wonder what's going to happen with the job force as things like that start to evolve, like you're going to see more people kind of shifting from job to job to job, and then maybe, I don't know, hitting their stride when they're in their early 30s because they have that work experience to know that like things don't happen overnight. I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think that the opportunity though is that like, if us as parents are aware that this is kind of a blind spot in this generation that we're raising, and we're intentional about addressing that blind spot, I think that, we can really raise the winners of the next generation, because like, if you think about their peers, their peers have this disadvantage. So I do think that it goes back to the fact that like, if you're being intentional as a parent and you recognize that, hey, this is very different than when I was growing up. Like I didn't need this to be drilled in my head because like, yeah, to your point, like if I had to even just go somewhere, like I had to like figure out how to go there or like know my way around. If, I wanted to meet someone, go on a date, like you have to go somewhere or like meet them at school or meet them at high school, like meet them in college, not it be this like, quick game. So, yeah, I think that just being aware as parents and trying to like address that in whatever way, shape or form, is important.
Yeah. That was my like kind of talk with him. Did you want to dive into this idea of AMRAP mentality today?
Yeah, man. I mean, we were talking the other day about, the kind of evolution of you, NCFIT, like all the things that you've done. And I think it ties into what we were just talking about like, how long things take and getting the clarity that I think we feel now about where we want to go. But AMRAP mentality has always, I feel like, been something that you constantly go back to. And I know it's still a big part of your life, even though it might not be like, the AMRAP mentality podcast, and it might not be like, this is the thing. But I mean, it's been super impactful for me to kind of use this in some respects. So I'm curious, like how this all came to be and where you are now with that approach to being a dad, being a protector, being a provider, being an athlete still, being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think there's certain things, like there's been certain taglines that have came and gone over the last 15 years in our business. The AMRAP mentality has been a part of like who I am to my core for a long time. Like training hard and AMRAP mentality have been like a part of my vernacular for as long as I can remember. And the AMRAP mentality really came around in like 2000. I want to say it was like 2011, 2012, actually 2012, because my daughter was young. And so, as the story goes, and I've shared this before, but I'll just share it again. Essentially, I was just burning the candle at too many ends. I was taking conference calls with Asia because we were opening up many corporate wellness locations. At the time, I had one daughter. I was married and we had a growing business, and I was trying to win the CrossFit Games. There's like a bunch of different things going on. And I was walking one day with my wife, and she was like strolling Ava. I'll never forget this. We're walking. It's like, I don't know, 7:00 at night or whatever it was after dinner. And she just looks at me. We had been talking, and she just looks at me and she's like, "Hey, what do you think about that?" And I just looked at her, and I just remember like the look on her face of disappointment because she knew I wasn't paying attention, right? She knew I wasn't paying attention to what she was saying. So I just looked at her. I was like, "Hey, look, I'm really sorry, but like, I don't know what you were talking about." And I remember just looking at her face and just being like, "Dude, this is not sustainable for me." While she's talking to me, while we're strolling our daughter, I'm thinking about walking on my hands to the CrossFit Games. Like I need to do a better job being present and focused in the different verticals that I was in my life. And that same thing would apply to like workouts, like, dude, I have countless times, Gabe, where I was in the garage on an assault bike doing conference calls with Asia. Countless. I mean, because the conference calls always happen at like 6, 7 p.m. because of the time change. And I would want to get in some intervals. And so I'd be listening on these conference calls, and I'd be muting and unmuting, and I'd just come off mute to say my piece and then remute. But I would remember I would always finish these calls. I'd always finish my training. I'd always finish these moments and be like, dude, did I really give it my best effort? Did I really reach my potential? Did I even do a good job? And so that's where the AMRAP mentality came to be, where I said, when am I more productive than when I'm in the middle of an AMRAP? I'm not answering my phone. I'm not distracted. I'm being present. I'm engaged. And so that's when I started saying, you know what? I need to embrace this AMRAP mentality in all areas of my life. And so I broke it down in a few segments. It's essentially identify your focus. So for me, it was like family, fitness, business. So you got to identify that, number one. Then you have to work hard at it. And I equated it to a bike. So like if you're riding a bike and you're not focused, you're going to tip over. So number one, what's your focus? Number two, you got to pedal. You got to work hard. You got to work hard. That's it. There's no other way around it. Number three, though, is the kicker, which is switching gears. And the best way to analyze it, the bike, is like, dude, sometimes you're on flat ground, sometimes you're going uphill, sometimes you're going downhill, and you need to switch gears throughout the day. And so the way that I broke it up, I mean, even today, this morning, at 6 a.m., I'm in the garage with Ava. I'm present and focused on training in the garage with Ava, even for a short period of time, 30 minutes, whatever, right? Then from there, I got on a podcast with Savon. I was present and focused. From there, I'm on a podcast with you. I'm present and focused. From here, I'll go do work. I'm present and focused. But I'm switching gears from one thing to the next. And once I'm done with that particular task, I no longer think about it and I focus on the current task. And I find that that's really helped my relationships, because now when I'm at dinner, I'm engaged. When I'm working out, I'm engaged. When I'm doing stuff like this, I'm engaged. And it's made me much more productive with my time because I'm AMRAPing. And yeah, that's it. That's, and I've had that lifestyle for a decade.
How much do you think this was born out of, like, specific to you? And then I guess the follow-up question is, when did you realize that you have like really bad attention, like, issues? Like, when did you become like
aware of it?
Really aware of like the way you operate is very different than other people operate.
I still don't even know if I really fully grasp it, to be perfectly honest with you. Like, there are times where I've caught myself clearly just like squirrel, clearly off thinking about something else. But for the most part, like, I never really think that I think any different than anybody else. Like, I know that when I was in school and all these different things, I've had really difficult times like with that. But yeah, I still don't even think that I'm like any different, right? But a lot of people tell me like I have a big problem with attention span. So it tells me that if many people say it, it's probably me and not them, Because
the reason I ask is I think that there's something like really powerful about being self-aware about areas that, and I don't even think that like, the way you operate is necessarily just a bad thing. Like, we talked about this a lot. Like, it is a blessing and a curse. Like, it's in many ways the reason that, both you and NCFIT have been as successful as they have been, because there is no stopping, right? Like, there's no moment where like you're on idle. Like, there's no idle in the Jason Khalipa, like mind engine. Like, it's always just revving. Sometimes it revs hotter than others, but it's always revving. And it's revving in like a direction of like new ideas, new things for the business, workout, family, this and that. And I think that that is a huge advantage in many respects, because I do think that a lot of people do sit idle for way too long, whether that's idle staring at their phone, whether that's idle, like just, in la la land, like not doing anything that's moving the needle forward. So definitely like very big strength in that respect. But I think that also being aware that sometimes, people can't keep up with the change in directions, and then using the AMRAP mentality as like a way to help solve that, I think is powerful. So that was the reason I asked the question, because I was wondering how much of it was you being aware that this is a thing, and then like really doing the thinking and like introspective thinking of like, okay, how do I solve this thing? And the AMRAP mentality kind of being the solution to it.
I mean, the reality is like, I felt like if I didn't make a change, I was never going to reach my potential. And I still feel that way today. Like, if I'm not being present and focused on what I'm trying to get done and really work hard at it, like, I'm not going to reach my potential. And that's in so many different areas. And I got to continuously check myself and remind myself of that. But if you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out, like, and yes, I am very scattered in my thoughts. And so it has to be very intentional to narrow in. And but that's when I get the best out of it, especially like, or when I'm active. So like when I'm active, it helps me to calm my brain a little bit, which is one of the reasons why I like being active. Like if like I'd rather go on a walk and talk than sit here. I'd rather go do something, you know, like Ash and I were actually just talking about this yesterday. We want to get back to doing like a weekly tennis together because that's one thing that we actually like could do together. She doesn't want to go run with me. She doesn't want to go whatever. But playing tennis, we could actually do together. Like, I suck. She's pretty good. It's a nice little battle.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm laughing because like, I wonder why she doesn't want to go run with you.
She doesn't want to run with me. She doesn't want to do anything like that kind of stuff, you know? Cause
yeah.
I try so hard. I'm like, hey, Ashley, like, you want to go in the garage? You want to go learn some like a little bit of self-defense? No. Hey, you want to go hit the bag a little bit with me? No. After a while, you just pick your battles, bro. You just let it go, you know?
The tennis thing.
Married as long
tennis
as
thing is good though. Yeah, man. You gotta find what works.
Yeah, but you know, back to what I was saying with the AMRAP mentality, it's like it's just one of those things where like the best way for a listener to think about it is if I asked you to do a minute of burpees right now, would you stop and answer your phone? No, you're just doing the minute of burpees. You're trying to crush it. And so how does that correlate to going out to eat with your family? How does that correlate to spending time with different people? And, you know, the best gift that the AMRAP mentality gave me, the reason why I wrote a book, As Many Reps as Possible, literally the heart of it. And we donated almost all the money from that book. I think we donated because the goal was not to make money from it. The goal was to spread this message that life has the ability to throw you a curveball. And the best thing you could do to prepare for that is to have strong relationships, the best financial situation, and best fitness you can. That's all that's in your control. That's it. And by embracing the AMRAP mentality, I developed good relationships because I'm real. I'm really trying to listen to you. I'm really trying to support you. I'm really trying to, you know, be a good friend or family member. And then obviously, if you embrace it in your work life, well, of course, you're going to try and do better because you're really working hard. And then obviously in your fitness, that's pretty straightforward. So that's the reason why we wrote the book, is because I had felt like embracing this mentality gave me a huge leg up when life came and punched me in the stomach.
You know what's really interesting? Just in hearing you say that, like, you know, the relationship piece and like being very real and forward, is now that I've known you for like 5 years. Yeah, 5 years, 5+ years. 5 years, like to the date, because I think I started in August. Dude, like what you see is what you get with Jay Khalipa. And it's so true, man. Like, if you listen to this podcast and you've heard like a couple episodes, like this is the exact same Jason that you would see if you met him on the street. And I think that's cool, but it really resonates with me now, especially looking back that, like, you know, I've known you for a while. Like, this is it. It's as crazy as he is on this podcast. He's crazy all the time.
Yeah, dude. Well, I mean, it's because when you have something traumatic happen in your life, you realize that the only thing that is really there for you is strong relationships with your friends and your family. And on top of that, if you could stack financial freedom and fitness freedom, if you could stack those things with strong relationships, you could take on a lot. But if you don't have all those different pieces in place, in particular, the support system, dude, it's tough, man. It's tough. It's, you know, it's tough. And if you weren't engaged on those conversations, how can you ever create real relationships? You know what I mean? Like, if you're just kind of like, like you sit down with your dad for dinner, and you're just kind of like, whatever, dude. Like, it's not a strong relationship. You know what I mean? Like, take the time to talk to him, you know?
Yeah, man. I mean, dude, it's one of the things that I'm most grateful for is the like close relationship that I have with my parents. And just the fact that, like, especially now, like having our kid and like having everyone here in Texas, like close by, like knowing that everyone is like so immersed on, like, you know, this growing family that we have, and that, like, you know, like he goes to grandma's house and like she loves it, and like we all just like have this really strong relationship that, you know, I feel like any family, like, you know, it's had its ups and downs, but like we've gotten to the point now where we're like this.
Yeah. And it takes
like,
work, man. Like,
dude, for sure, everything takes work, right? Like, this stuff isn't like, it's not like, you know, rainbows and unicorns, and then like, you know, you just kind of like, that's what it's going to be because you're lucky and you had a great family. Like, it takes work. Like, it takes effort 2 ways. And,
you know, and I'm very fortunate. I'll be the first one to admit, like, I'm very blessed with all the people we have around us. We don't we have great people around us, and it still takes a lot of work. It takes you showing up. It takes, I think it's a two-way street in these relationships. But, when I put up like a thread not that long ago, I don't know if people really got what I was trying to say, but like, dude, you should be trying to develop great relationships with your friends and family as best as you can today. And if there's going to be some people that you have to exit from your life, even family. And I get that. Like, I understand that. And there's certain situations that are just too far gone. Right. But man, as a community, dude, when shit's hitting the fan, you want to be able to find people that could take ropes, throw them down, lift you up. And then when they're going through tough stuff, you want to be able to throw down ropes to help them up, because that's kind of how the gym, that's how everything works. Like on a small scale, it's like you go into the gym, you're not really feeling it. And then all of a sudden you got a guy and he brings in that energy, that vibe. You're like, dude, levels each other up. It's the same thing, just, a little bit more dramatic when it comes to the full life,
For sure, man. But it's everything. The people you surround yourself is everything. You want to get fitter, surround yourself with fit people. You want to get, more financially in a better place, like surround yourself with people that are fucking crushing it in that aspect of life. You want to like have stronger, better relationship with your family, like surround yourself with people that value family and stuff. I'll share this with you. One of the coolest things that when I met Ariel, my wife now, I was pretty sold from like the moment. I was like, this is it. That said, the more I learned about her relationship with her family and like her family's like relationship overall, because Ariel's dad is married twice. So this is his second marriage. And the fact that, because that didn't end like amicably at all. But the fact that regardless, they've made it like a very important part for everyone to stay together and like put all that stuff aside. And there's still a really close relationship with Ariel and her, half brothers. Like that to me was just like another, like, that's what I want in my life, like that kind of like, putting ego, whatever aside and like keeping a strong family relationship. And it just like, man, it just makes things so nice. Cause the saying goes, dude, you marry your spouse, you marry your spouse's family.
Dude, 100%, man. Like, so my wife, her family, like her dad remarried and everybody gets along. And it's like, it just makes holidays and stuff like that easier. And I understand that's not the norm. Like, dude, it's not the norm. And that's why we're super blessed. We're very grateful.
But it's not the norm because it takes work, right? Like it takes a lot of work. When families go through that, like
outside your control, which is tough, right?
Right. Of course.
Like, what's in our control is what's in my control is like, am I doing the best I can to develop relationships? Because I can't control like, whatever else is going on. But that's the reason why I wrote the book though, man. That's the reason why I wrote the book. And we haven't talked about the book in a while, but I haven't even read the book in a long time. I got to go back, and if you want to listen to it on Audible, you can go to Amazon. You can go listen to as many reps as possible on Audible. I've had a lot of good reviews on it. Maybe I'll bring it back.
And people can still get a print version. Still on Amazon, still out there.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if we've re-uploaded. I gotta check it out, but definitely on Audible. But yeah, man, that was the whole incentive. Was like, I felt like I had this cheat code with the AMRAP Mentality that really helped me. And it's like I wanted to go spread that and share it with more people. And I'm curious if I'll write a book on something else in the future. Like I only want to write or share things that I think could like really make an impact for other people based on my life. Like I'm just sharing with you, this has been really impactful for me. Here you go. Like it's like the fitness thing. We share it all the time. It's been very impactful for us.
Yeah, I love it, man. The one thing that has worked, dude, wonders for me. And I think that like I've really stepped into this like full on maybe for the past like 5-6 months, just because like in terms of volume, the amount of work that as a marketing team, but also just myself like needs to put out now. And also just other things like, being a dad, like I'm super busy now. And the one way that like, this idea of the AMRAP mentality from like a tactical sense has worked so well for me. Might not work well for everyone, but I suggest at least you try it if you feel like you want to be more productive. Is I don't have a to-do list, but I put everything that needs to get done on my calendar with the amount of time that it should take me to get done. So as soon as something comes up, like you're like, hey, got to write this thing, or like now, finishing the Never Zero, like putting that together, like it's on my calendar on Tuesdays. and I have 60 minutes allotted to do it. And everything is in my calendar that's on my to-do list. And then I bought this timer. So it's just one of these, like you turn
it looks like a Nest air conditioner.
Yeah, it looks like exactly like that. And then it's really easy. So you just turn it and set like a time. So like I do 25-minute sprints. And so I'll set 25, I'll hit, you just press it and it starts counting down. And then for 25 minutes, I have like music on and my phone is on Do Not Disturb. And my wife also knows that if the timer is on, like it's not a time to be like, hey, like, can you, whatever, right? Like I'm in a 25-minute sprint, which has been especially important because just the way our house is set up now, and this is probably going to change. Like I'm in our living room. So I'm in our living room, like they're usually like doing stuff, hanging out here. So it's just a really good way. Like I'm 25-minute sprint and then I give myself a 5-minute break. So like if I have an hour set aside to work on something, that's 2 sprints that I have to finish it. And the break is actually really important because 25 minutes tends to be what works for most people. And it works for me is like the amount of time that I can like really be in it before like I do need to, whatever, check my phone, talk to Ariel, like, smile at the kid and, get a recharge from him. And dude, it like the amount that I can get done when like that system is in place and like my to-do list is in my calendar, dude, game changer, like absolute game changer.
Where'd you get that clock from?
I just Amazoned it. I think there's like a much fancier version that I got a sponsored ad for. And then I just looked it on Amazon and like this thing, like, but on a downside, like this thing feels like it might break in like 2 weeks because it cost me like $10, but it works for now.
All right. I mean, the case in point is obviously setting a clock. Yeah, man. I love that. It's something I'm working on. I got a couple of good books that we're going to be, I got a couple of good books, a couple of good podcasts. I'm currently listening to the one with Patrick and Joe Rogan. I'm still not all the way through it. So the one with the
Pat David. Yeah, I love that guy. I can hear that guy talk for hours. I think it's the accent.
So they were talking about like, dude,
they were out there. They were in there.
They're talking about a bunch of stuff. And yeah. Well, brother, I think, we talked about the AMRAP mentality. We dove into some stuff. I definitely want to talk more.
Do we have a Yeti question of the day?
The Yeti question of the day, I got to put it back online and stay tuned for the Yeti question of the day. I get a lot of questions that come through. Let me see if we have a good one for today.
Yeah. If you want to find one, I'll take a second and just make sure that if you're not signed up for the Never Zero newsletter, highly, highly recommend it. Jason's sending that out once a week. And I'm super pumped. We're getting some really good reception on that. The whole goal behind that newsletter is just to send out some workout inspiration, podcast books that are on Jason's mind, and hopefully, a little bit of like, let's get some shit done this week. Goes out every Wednesday, which I feel is also really nice because you're like middle of the week and you just get like a little bit of, Jason RPMs to get you going. So if you haven't signed up, link is in the show notes.
So Stephanie doesn't even know that she's going to win a Yeti water bottle.
I love it.
Because basically I put up on Threads about this idea. So this is not necessarily a question. This is just a thing that I just wanted to share. I had put up this comment about how essentially I've coached thousands of classes, and across thousands of classes, you have, let's just say 15 or 20 people per class. You're engaging with thousands of people on a regular basis over the span of 10, 15, 20 years. And one of the things I've learned is that you never know what people are going through when they walk into the gym. And this is just like,
I saw this one.
After owning gyms for years and coaching thousands of classes, one thing has always stood out. People come in and you never know what they're going through. Even if you have known them for years, everyone struggles. If you are kind, they'll remember it. If you're a dick, they'll remember that too. And essentially where I was going with that is like, this was a lesson I learned in the hospital, right? When I would spend time in the hospital, everybody was going through stuff. And so there's a level of compassion and care that was different than outside the hospital. You'd leave the hospital and it was like, people are honking each other, getting all crazy. You're in the hospital and everybody's going, in general, people are going through stuff that's like not ideal. And so they treat each other a certain way. And this woman, Stephanie, just reached out to me and she was sharing with me that, a member had came in and, was being just really just not normal, sluggish, wasn't himself, sluggish. And long story short, they had found out some really bad news about one of their children. And like, if she hadn't gone up to him and asked questions and led with care, compassion, she could have saw like, oh, this guy's being a jerk, or she could be like, hey, go over there, grab your barbell, whatever, because he comes in, his vibe's off. He looks upset. He looks frustrated, but instead she has simply asked what was going on. She found out, and then boom, it now totally changed the relationship between that member and her. So for any coach out there, any person out there, I think that it's really important. This is the takeaway from my threads, is that the next time you're out and you see someone, you never know what that individual just went through. And I think it's really important to treat everybody with that level of compassion when you walk up to it, because your perspective just needs to make sure that it's adjusting accordingly. So that's not necessarily a Yeti question today, but Stephanie had reached out with a really good full story. I just don't want to share it all here. And I want to just send her a water bottle.
I love that, man. And I think that taking that a little bit of a step forward, I think that also when you feel like someone was like rude to you or whatever, the same thing applies there too, right? So not just in this case of like, someone seems a little off and like whatever, but I think that like, the saying that I completely agree with is like, hurt people. And I think that if you realize that, if someone says something, does something, whatever, especially on social media, right? Like someone says something hurtful on social media. Like if someone's taking the time to say something that isn't nice on social media, like you should have compassion, man, because there's something going on there that's making them spend the time to like try and bring someone else down. And I think that, not trying to like get upset or like combat or even like spending any energy on that, but really just being like, man, like to your point, like you don't know what's going on in their life that, is making them react that way, and be kind or just don't say anything. And like, but don't take it as like, you're the issue or you're the problem, because you never know what they're going through and that might make them react that way.
That's it, man. Well, dude, if you guys are listening to this podcast, you didn't listen to the episode with Matt Boudreau, we have some other episodes out. We got Josh Bridges that's coming out, or probably it's actually already been out. We have a lot of other great episodes coming up. I'm getting Jacob Pepner on. We got to talk to him. Our goal with this podcast is pretty simple. Let's level up. We're going after, not just supporting dads, but also just people in general who want to just improve and want to be better protectors for their family, providers. They want to be able to train hard. Like that's something that's like deep to my core. And today, obviously, we shared a mindset tool that I use, which is called the AMRAP Mentality. So I appreciate all you guys. Any final words here, Gabe?
No, man, this, no joke, might be one of my favorite podcasts we recorded. I feel like we went a little deeper than usual, man. And I really enjoyed it. No, I'm serious. This has been fun, man. And it's been really fun to come along for the ride and be a part of, where this podcast is going to go moving forward. So if anyone enjoyed the show like I did, because I really enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating and a review, share it with your friends. And yeah, dude, I'm pumped for the guests we have, pumped to keep having these conversations with you. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, guys, we'll keep getting after it, and we'll see you again next week.